We are live. We're joined this hour by Julia Wallace of Left Voice. Very, very excited to talk to you, Julia. I was going to have you back on anyways because last time the microphone issues were so bad. I really wanted to give you an opportunity, or I really wanted to have the opportunity to talk to you one more time. But let's just get right into it because, I mean, things have changed quite a bit since last time we talked. Yeah, let's get right into it. So the uprisings, why are they so intense?
I mean, first of all, of course, solidarity to all the people that have been in the streets, fighting back, standing up, doing a little justice shopping. Hey, the reparations discussion has been a little slow anyway. I think, I'm really proud of people rising up in Los Angeles, in cities across the country. I think every single state has had an uprising, and around the world. So folks have been rising up in Auckland, New Zealand, in Berlin, in London, in Greece, in Italy, in Brazil, in France. People hate the police everywhere, and their fury about it has been showing. And like, what is that? Like, why are people so furious? I think in part because of COVID-19 and the pandemic that's happened that has killed so many people, and the capitalists have been so callous about people dying. They delayed the information for people. People were continuing to work in unsafe conditions and dying. People were being denied tests and being denied treatment, particularly Black people, Black and Latino people. And a lot of Black and Latino people have been forced to work. So this issue of people dying, of people having to work, from Amazon to McDonald's, like that has really infuriated people. And then the police, the most obvious death of this cop, Derek Chauvin, who, it wasn't just a bang bang, 2 seconds, I shot you or whatever. This was 8 minutes of staring into a cell phone, staring into a crowd of people dead in our eyes as he extinguished this person's life, as he heard him crying he couldn't breathe. So that was a declaration of war, in my opinion. And the fact that it took so long for him to finally get arrested and all of that really exposed the racism of US capitalism and imperialism. And I think that that's what's led to the explosivity around the world, because people can relate to injustice. People are hungry. People are getting evicted. People are getting beaten up by the police, and in their respective cities, in their respective countries. So that's why I think there's an explosivity, not just against the police, but against this system, systemic racism, capitalism, and really people fighting for their lives.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you. Why do you think things are so, just generally speaking, in Los Angeles, when something goes off, it's always more. It seems like LA. I don't want to turn this into competition or anything, but like LA is always really, really intense. Whether it starts here or whether it starts somewhere else and it comes here, it's really just
Because the police are really intense. Because poverty is really intense. There's like 40 or 50 billionaires that live in our city and 60,000 homeless people. Like, and the police maintain those lines. You notice there's not a whole lot of homeless people in Beverly Hills. It's not a coincidence. It's not that homeless people don't like, Beverly Hills or whatever. It's because if you end up sleeping anywhere there, they'll kick your ass. They'll kick your ass and drop you off somewhere else and get away with it. And that's just the ass kicking, the daily ass kicking. That's not the killing. That's not the torturing. That's not the raping and sexual assault. That's just like the daily stuff. So yeah, in LA, it's very stark. It's very stark, and the poverty is very stark, and the wealth is very stark. That's why I think in part LA is like that. And yeah.
No, I absolutely agree. I'm looking at the Left Voice right now, and they've written a number of articles. I know that you're a regular contributor writer for Left Voice, and there is just all kinds of articles here, all essentially in solidarity and praise, not just solidarity. Solidarity is the wrong word. In praise of the uprisings, rebellions, um, which I again is I the correct line I would say. But so is there kind of a consensus that the left voice has around this?
Yes. So Left Voice is, a revolutionary socialist press. We try our best to put ourselves at the service of the movement. Um, and really reflect on the rage that's happening and the uprisings that are taking place in different ways, slice of life kind of things too. So recently we had an interview with a 15-year-old socialist from Northern California. We also post videos. So, for example, there were some workers, Latino workers, who I guess had been hired to board up some stores, and they used some of the planks of wood to chant along Black Lives Matter with these planks of wood. Um, One of the folks that we work with, Tristan Taylor, had been arrested in Detroit, and even though tons of people were arrested and let go right away, he was charged with a felony. And so we put our press to the service to fight for him to get free. And so he's free now. And now we're demanding that they drop all the charges, because first they charged him with a felony, and now they've dropped it down. I think it's a ticket. So we want them to drop all the charges. Everybody who's been arrested in these struggles is a political prisoner, and we want all those prisoners to be freed, including the people who have been imprisoned for decades. So yeah, we're also linked internationally. So we've been having discussions. I was on a Zoom call with about 500 people, from Brazil, because this young 14-year-old Joel Pedro was murdered by the cops in the favelas. And so we have a group called Quilombo Vermelho, which means the Red Quilombo. And it's a Black Marxist group that we founded, that our grouping founded. And so really what Left Voice is we're trying to reflect what's going on, but we also have analysis about what we think is the reason what's happened, and also what we think strategically needs to happen for this movement to go further. There's only so many cop cars you can burn. There's only so many CVSs you can loot. Defend the actions of these protesters and fighting back, particularly around these giant mega corporations and banks who have been looting and exploiting our communities and the working class. But really, like, what is our strategy for abolishing the police? What is our strategy for taking these people down once and for all? And so we're discussing that as well through our paper, through our online press.
Yeah. So can you give our viewers a little bit of insight into what is the position of the young socialist? I mean, what are some of their hopes and dreams or visions for the future?
Oh, in the article, well, you got to read it. Leftvoice.org.
Yeah, we'll put the link below. Yeah, definitely read that article.
Read that article. It's 15-year-old socialist Alex Dillard. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a time where really young people can take their destiny and be in charge of their destiny. If we let capitalists keep going, they'll destroy this entire world and kill us with it. And if it wasn't clear before, with the planetary destruction and the intense fires and floods that have happened, this pandemic should make it perfectly clear that they were willing to have people go back to work in unsafe conditions and get sick and pass away.
Yeah.
So that's not acceptable. And so we need to and so I encourage young people to really study, to plan. This is really a class war. And, so in this war, there is a strategy that we need to discuss with each other and develop, organization that we need to discuss and develop, and international connections. It's one thing for us to say, hey, we support all the struggles of people of the world. We support the working class liberation of the world. But it's another thing to actually build links, build contacts, have pretty regular communication and to try to create something where when something happens in one place, we are not just reacting to it, but we are organized and planning for it in another place, in another part of the world.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
that's
what?
that's what I think in that way.
Yeah. Look at the domestic scene. What is your response? What kind of response do you have to Joe Biden's proposition that instead of shooting people, shooting for kill, to shoot them in the legs? I mean,
It
like
it's just disgusting the way they can talk about basically maiming people, um, rather than killing them, and thinking that that's acceptable, that's okay. Um, you can yeah, you can shoot black people, but don't kill them. Just maim them. Just hurt them. Um, and and really, it's kind of emblematic of the Democrat and Republican parties. You have two older white men who have histories of racism and misogyny attacking both people of color and black people in particular in their personal and political careers. And we're supposed to choose between the two. And I think if this uprising tells us anything, it's that, history is not linear. It's not just this line where things just get better and better and better, or they just get worse and worse and worse. That we have agency as working class and oppressed people, and that we can decide that this is not the way it's going to be. It's not just going to be where, okay, you killed one of us, and now we're going to wait around till November, and we're really going to get you in the ballot box. If all of us actually make it till November, many of us will be murdered by November by the police. So we kind of have to ask ourselves, like, if we're going to take control of our own destiny, then what does that look like? What does that look like for the long term? And I don't mean long term like, oh, in 100 years we'll have socialism. Like, no, I mean that we need to plan to fight back. And the way we can fight back, especially now, is through workers organizing. And so what does that mean? So a small example is that's happened recently, where some workers at a taco restaurant refused to serve and to fill an order that the police had made. The workers just walked out and they were like, go to hell. We're not making your damn tacos, you fucking pigs. Um, in another instance, you had a bus driver who refused to transport the police, and his union backed him up. I think that the leadership of the unions are not taking enough of an active role in opposing the police and decertifying the police from the AFL-CIO. Police unions are not unions, they're Klan meetings, and the police are not on our side. And so they should not be in our unions. And but I think that was kind of emblematic in that. There's a frontline healthcare workers task force that Left Voice has been working with, who have been fighting in the nurses unions as well to challenge the role of the police. And I think we really need to be planning for work stoppages and strikes against the police, especially now, because the workplace is smaller now. We're essential workers, whatever that means. I think other workers who aren't employed now are also important. But many of us, like myself, we're working, and we really have a power. They tried to start and reopen the economy. Remember how they were going to do that shit, and it was supposed to be great. They wanted to just reopen the economy. COVID-19, we're just going to pretend like that didn't happen. And the reason why they did that was to make more money. And so now, we should realize then that our work in the economy is important, and therefore withhold our work and start making demands and start organizing for that. And I think that and that's like one way in terms of activity that we really can take power. And then the other way, and I'll pause, but the other way that I wanted to also talk about when you mentioned elections is forming our own political organizations. There are organizations that, the DSA is one of them that's a huge membership. They hitched their wagon behind the Bernie Sanders trail, and you see what happened with that. He basically is falling behind Biden like many of us knew that he would. We need to form our own political organization of the people who are out in the streets now, of the workers who are in the hospitals. We need to form our own political organization that has no capitalists, no cops, no imperialists, no bigots that cannot be members of our organization, unlike the Democratic Party that is filled with cops, murderous cops. For example, James T. Butts of Inglewood, California. He's a Democrat. Several weeks before police misconduct records were going to be made public, forcibly public by law, he shredded them. And of course he did. He used to be the police chief of Santa Monica PD. Chief Bratton, that has bounced around and murdered Black and brown people and helped to orchestrate the deaths of Black and brown people in Los Angeles and in New York and back in New York after he came to Los Angeles and beat the hell out of people in MacArthur Park at an immigrant rights May Day protest. So these people are Democrats. And Amy Klobuchar, who got what's his name off, Derek Chauvin, who's got so many complaints, who murdered George Floyd. She's a Democrat, and she basically got every killer cop off and prosecuted young Black people for low-level crimes. So I'm saying this to say that we need to form our own political organizations. We can't be in the same political party as Chase Bank that's been evicting people. Can't be in the same political organization as Chief Bratton and Mayor James T. Butts. We can't be in the same political organization as these capitalists that exploit us and these landlords that evict us.
What do you make of Eric Garcetti's theatrics?
I mean, Dem's gonna Dem, right? Like he's kneeling, he's crying, he's doing all these things, and he's also, closing down the COVID-19 testing centers. And he's also given LAPD carte blanche to beat people up, which they've done, to arrest people for peacefully protesting. He's in the pockets of the developers. So, see, the sun is setting, so let me just put this here. So like Eric Garcetti, he is a quintessential liberal who says a lot of the right kind of things in rhetoric, but in reality is a defender of the capitalist exploitation system, a defender of the landlords, and an exploiter of the poor and the homeless. So, yeah, whatever. Kneel all you want. That's not enough.
Yeah. Garcetti actually, it seems like to me that just from following it, he seems to really intensified the war on the homeless that he inherited from Villaraigosa, who inherited from the guy before him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he really that seemed to be a big priority of his, to really just clear everyone out.
Yeah, that's what they call it. Cleaning you up like trash. Not like these are human beings who should have homes. People are talked about the homeless, like not a person, but a cluster, dust to be swept away. Not why are people homeless? Why are more people homeless? Because the rent is too high. The rent's too high everywhere. And now is the time for us, especially us that are organizing, that are pissed off, to really be connecting the dots. How many people are going to be getting those eviction notices when those moratoriums, those fake moratoriums, expire?
Yeah. So you said earlier you wanted to get more into talking about building organizations outside of either major political party, outside the duopoly. What are the concrete steps for that to happen, you think?
Well, really engaging with people who are paying attention to those things, trying to call attention to that. I know for us as Left Voice, we're not the biggest, but we use our website and, as I said, put our website to the service of people that are in the streets, that are mobilizing, protesting, and also analyzing what's happening to figure out what to do next. And I think all of us, as socialists, as revolutionaries, really need to be discussing with each other, debating with each other, and in being really serious about what that would look like, and how we could do that on a mass scale. Not to say, just unity for unity's sake. We have differences. Let's talk about them. But we need to be really serious about this, especially as Trump is trying to step up the state repression. I have a sense that it's a lot of rhetoric, and his scurrying into his bunker because of the protests really shows his cowardice, and it shows the cowardice of some of his people, but also those people are willing to kill and they're willing to go to jail. So we need to also be organizing ourselves to defend ourselves against these fascists, not just in an individual way, but really in an organized way to do that. So yeah, we're in unprecedented times, and many of the things that have happened this year, I would not have predicted. Maybe, I knew there'd be, and many of us knew there'd be another uprising against the police, that would be intense. We knew that this uprising would learn some of the lessons from previous uprisings against the police, but didn't know when, didn't know how, and now it's here. So let's encourage our folks that are being brave and standing up, but also let's fight. Let's continue to struggle together, and also to raise socialist ideas.
Yeah. Is there anything particular about this uprising that you would view differently than Ferguson or Baltimore? Is there something? Is there any character?
The scale, for one, the scale is like the one. Thousands and thousands of people everywhere, not just one city where, okay, it's Ferguson and then it's Baltimore. It's like Ferguson and Baltimore and Chicago and New York and Riverside and San Diego and Santa Rosa and Oakland and London and whatever. John Boyega, saying he's ride or die. I mean, it's unprecedented. So that's one thing. The other thing is that a lot of the so-called leaders and people who have positioned themselves to be leaders in our communities are not able to just claim that. They're not. They may say, they may make remarks or get interviewed or whatever, but this movement is largely independent of a central organization. And the Democrats are going to, of course, attempt to co-opt it. They're going to say, well, we've got policies. Now that's what they're doing. Bernie, Ilhan Omar, we've got policies to put in place. We've got our plans and our documents. But in reality, they defend the police. They defend the police's right to kill us, and they just don't think they should kill us as intensely. So, we, as I had said before, we need to form our own political groupings and organizations. And I think that's the other thing that's made this different, is that everything is on the table. Defending ourselves, fighting back, strikes, all these things that kind of seemed far off or abstract are really things that we're thinking of in earnest and in seriousness.
Yeah. In San Diego, 2 banks went up in smoke, in flames. There
you go. That's
different.
like a stalwart of Camp Pendleton's up down there, and they did that. People are really brave, and also this is not just Black people. Black people are absolutely in the forefront of this, but that other question of allyship, what should white people do? You should join the protests. You should be here. And other people, Latino people, Asian people. I'm seeing tons of different kinds of people that are being just as daring and risking themselves. And I think also the liberal kind of media is trying to create a wedge and saying, oh, it's these adventuristic white people. Well, like, if people have seen or been to any of these actions, we know it's multi-ethnic people doing stuff. We know that that's what it is. And I think we need to engage each other politically about what some of the actions mean. I think in Los Angeles, especially, you know, we were told in 92, don't burn your hood. Why are you guys burning up your communities? Why are you burning up your communities? That's so a constant refrain. And then people were like, all right, let's go to Santa Monica.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know they were going to Beverly Hills. I mean, I saw
And they went to Beverly Hills, and they went to Hollywood, and they went to the Grove. So it's like, didn't you tell us not to do that? Inglewood's fine. Watts is fine. Boyle Heights is good.
yeah.
You know, so to me, it's like, but we need to be organized, because again, it's not, the rage is justified, but you know, burning stuff, it's not a strategy for liberation. Liberation is something that may involve those tactics, but that can't be the in and of itself.
Yeah. What did you make of Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, and the thing I wanted to ask you about, to expand on, is like this question of like people who, people who are joining in. I see a lot of people kind of, and I feel like they're very well intentioned, but they end up sounding kind of weird when they talk about this. Like, oh, they're trying to distract from the goodness of the movement, and they almost sound like Bull Connor on accident, like, outside agitators or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's like,
yeah, the good Negroes. The good Negroes would never. We would never. What you talk about? We have a history of burning plantations, racist places. Like, no, this is not out. We're not the good Negroes, and those are the bad agitators. There's absolutely police provocateurs, and so I'm not trying to like hide that. There's absolutely cops and right wingers who are trying to fuck shit up and do that. But if we just had the same amount of people just do a die-in, would that be the same? Would it have the same effect? I'm not totally convinced. Yeah. And I think also the rage that people have is an old rage. It's an old rage and a dissatisfaction of the way things have been. And that needs to be respected. People did the kneeling. They did the silent protests. I don't particularly care for silent protests, but they did that. People did all kinds of stuff. And that can't be, that's not only is that not enough, but in some ways, sometimes those, I mean, I'm not against those things, but like sometimes tactics can kind of be used to silence people. The blackout thing, that's like used to silence people. Don't be quiet. Be like loud. Don't shut yourself up. It's a way to paralyze people. Like, oh, you can't speak out because you're white. You can't speak out because you're not black. Da 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 da. Guess what? Black voices need to be heard, but guess what else? We need solidarity. We need people to have those conversations and to be speaking out with us and together. We need people to talk and to listen. Not just one, not just the other.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to be comrades and not allies. Our struggles are inextricably linked. And if you've studied U.S. history, particularly U.S. labor history, you know that the U.S. government, police, and National Guard alike have murdered white strikers in cold blood with no problem. So so white people are not exempt. White people aren't killed by police because they're white, but they are not exempt from being killed by the state.
Yeah. So I mean, like, the next question I was going to ask you was like, what about, like, what is it? What is your opinion of people who, because we see, like you said, it's all around the world. So like in New Zealand, I saw They were doing I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to.
The
They're doing that
Haka?
the Haka. Yeah, they're doing the Haka. And kind of bringing their own grievances in certain ways. I mean, definitely see that here in America. In San Jose, there was all kinds of like Mexican flags flying around, and same thing at CNN. They hoisted it up. So I mean, like all kind of bringing their own grievances against the U.S. state, or again in the case of New Zealand against the New Zealand state. People bringing their own anger and their own suffering to the struggle.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that the Maori people in New Zealand have been oppressed in their own country, their own lands. So absolutely, I'm sure they super relate. And Mexican people have been oppressed in their own lands. Los Angeles was part of Mexico. California, Califas, like people, it's a trip how I mean, Spanish is a language of imperialism and conquest too. So like don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to like romanticize it. But like this is stolen land from many different colonizers. And so I'm with people relating this struggle of Black people to their own struggles. I'm for that. I think that, of course, those people, the reason why we're all brought together is because of the killing of this Black man, George Floyd, and also the killings of Breonna Taylor, Sean Reed, and Ahmaud Arbery, who was murdered by white vigilantes. But I feel like we need to encourage solidarity as much as we can and tell people to bring their own, as you said, their own grievances, how this affects them, why this enrages them, and unite in a movement against the police, against capitalism, and against imperialism, which is the world police.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the world police, looks like the world police is getting ready to like batter the people of Washington D.C. Trump is talking seriously about using the army on people. I mean, I don't know if he's. I think he writes a lot of checks. His mouth writes a lot of checks he can't really cash, but he could do that. I mean, that's within they're there and the army's there and they're there. So I mean, like,
I think we need to prepare to defend them, and to fight back against that. The Trump does talk a lot, and then he says he didn't mean it. Watch, he's going to be saying that he's responsible for those police being arrested, and he's going to be saying he says all kinds of wacky stuff. But he ran and he hid when people were there, and I'm sure his white supremacist friends see that, right? Like, yeah. Hey, what about the superiority of the white race? What about that? If you're so superior, why didn't you just stay and fight? Why didn't you go out like KK Katniss in Salt Lake City, who tried to like bring out that crossbow and got fucked up and got his car torched?
Yeah. Did you see? Okay.
They really believe that. A lot of these white supremacists actually believe they're superior. But he clearly doesn't, because because he ran and hid in a bunker like Hitler did. And we know what happened to him after that. So I think that that it's a serious thing. I know I'm joking, but it is very serious. The cracks in the Department of Security, and I think the National Guard issued a note about Black Lives Matter. They didn't say Black Lives Matter, but like opposing racism. I mean, obviously these people, like, they were called in when there was the uprisings in the late 1960s and 67 and 68 to put down Black uprising then. So, we can take it for what it's worth, but those people also, Trump was trying to end their duty before this uprising happened on June the 2nd, so that they would only have worked for 89 days. And so he wouldn't have to pay for their medical benefits on the 90th day, which would kick in, which was today. Gotta pay the benefits now. But like, how must one feel to be expected to enforce this oppression of people A lot of them are not. It's not just black people. So people are probably seeing their relatives' faces in these protesters. And then he's like, I mean, in this COVID-19 thing, and then Trump is like, well, I'm not going to pay for your medical benefits, and I'm going to discontinue it on the last day that I have to not pay your medical benefits. I wonder how that must feel for a National Guard soldier. And now they're being asked to not just stand around or to be active during this pandemic. Now they're also asked to be repressive. And I think some of those people are going to reconsider that. I mean, I don't know. I'm not defending the National Guard. I think they're an oppressive institution. But there's issues. There's issues internally, and those are going to be further exposed, I think.
Yeah, I think that definitely true that Trump has a history of not paying his workers, like period, or
Yeah.
paying people that work for him. Like, he's got a long history of that, just
Yeah.
not.
And so it's like, wait, you're supposed to, but if you're like a National Guards person, you're supposed to be like enforcing this shit. And
Yeah.
then it's like, well, I'm going to wait one day. Not that I'm discontinuing it and it just happens to be when your benefits end. I'm going to wait one day before it so that I don't have to give you medical benefits because I don't give a shit about you either.
Mhm.
I wonder how that like affects their consciousness.
He's like Bill Murray and Scrooged. When like, you know that movie Scrooged with
Yeah.
Bill Murray? He like fires everybody on Christmas or something like that.
Yeah. But yeah, that was like oh, it's looking bad for him. But the thing is if we are fooled into thinking that we can have justice by having Biden as president and voting for him, we are sorely mistaken. And we need to get to working now to building this political force. Not because we're going to win it in November, but because we want to win it for always.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I know it really doesn't matter if they're well spoken, if they're polite, or if they're I'm saying if they say things, if they lie, if they tell sweet little lies, versus being like very upfront. But it just seems like Biden is really he is like an escalation of the lesser evil. Like I mean, like I know his policies aren't that different from like Kerry or Clinton or whatever. I understand his track record is very similar, but like just in rhetoric, he just is so much more like this shoot him in the leg stuff. You ain't black. He's got a long track record of saying things like this about lots of different people.
Yeah, he does. He does, and they're trying to prop him up. It's like a political weekend at Bernie's where they just tote him around. Oh, no, it's good. He's great. He's great, guys. No, it's good. He's alive. It's fine. And like, well, wait a minute. He just said shoot black people in the leg. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. He's totally our guy. We should absolutely support him. Yeah, but he just said, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. It's like, no, I see a corpse in a Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses. This is not okay. This is like,
yeah.
Who else is going for this? Like, no, he's not an alternative. And now, speaking of Bernie Sanders has just decided to come out of wherever he was and provide a policy that he didn't have. And people had begged Bernie Sanders for a policy on racism. And he was like, nah, healthcare for all. It's cool. And now that like people are rising up, he's trying to shore up support for the Democrats because people really are disgusted with Biden too, or at least aren't convinced of him. But the thing is, Sanders really proved himself as not being willing to be an independent force and actually being, basically assisting the Democratic Party to try to shore up more votes. And everything that he said that he stood for, he backed away from to support Biden. Yeah, and so those people, I think a lot of those people who believed in him are in the streets now. And I hope that those people turn their rage and disillusionment in him with political organizing for our own political organization.
Yeah. But you also mentioned earlier Omar. There's of course AOC, um, Talib. So there's a whole whole group of people that are looking to eventually kind of they're gonna supplant him. I mean, eventually he's gonna retire because the world spins. We all get older. I'm getting older too. like we're all getting older. But and so they're kind of being pushed to in the next like decade or so to essentially be the new Bernie Sanders, or a different variation of it. So, how do we how what should we do to prevent us from getting burned again?
I mean, it's the same thing. Organizing. We need to discuss with each other, build our own organizations, our own political parties, and like that's what I think we need to do. The part of the reason why the squad and other people have grown is because of the crisis. The sheer magnitude of the capitalist crisis is 40 million people now that are unemployed. There was already an economic crisis developing. And so their ideas and rhetoric are more to the left. But when it comes down to it, Ilhan Omar supported AIPAC. It comes down to it, they voted for the US military budget. So these things are not just ideas. I know we live in an imperialist country, so we're not seeing the consequences, the physical consequences of that war budget, but it's real. And that's another reason why we need to be internationalists, so that we really can understand what people are going through when these war things are voted for. That white phosphorus that's dropped on people by the Zionist Israeli government is funded by the U.S.
Yeah.
So how could we defend that? How could we slight that for better health care or forgiveness of student loans? No, we have to say that is completely unacceptable and form our own political organization so that when we meet with each other, the banks aren't in the room. The cops aren't in the room. They may try to be, but the cops are not invited. And the imperialists are not invited. They are not our friends. We are not all in this together. There's Amazon. They're making trillions of dollars, but they don't want to protect their workers. They're going cheap, firing people like Chris Smalls, who was organizing for better safety. Not even like we want more money and better benefits. So anyways, yeah, no, we need our own political organization. We need to break from the Democratic Party, and we need class independence. Not just a third party for third party's sake, but something that is explicitly class independent from the Democrats and the Republicans.
I think the things that people don't really seem to realize. I mean, I think that people I tend to identify with like the squad because they see them as these women of color for various backgrounds. And they see them facing sexism. They see them facing racism, and they can identify like having experienced that in their own lives. And they think that like that's what happens to me in my place of work, right? But they don't really. It doesn't seem to like people don't seem to know that like, okay, well, you like work at like FedEx, or you work at like Edison, or you work where you work at a hospital. These people are going to work to kill people. They don't really seem to like that. That consciousness seems to be lacking.
That's right.
Yeah. So okay, so I know I've taken up a lot of your time. I know you're tired. Can you what are some words of advice that people should know? How should they look at this uprising, and given that outlook, what should they do?
Okay. So this uprising is, a consequence of a lot of the kind of the oppression that has intensified, and that the capitalists have no ability to resolve this crisis except to exploit us and kill us more. And I think the time is now to be daring and brave, not only in our actions, but in our ideas and in our ideologies, and to really be thinking about what does it mean to make a revolution. And for the working class, that means the regular rest of us to be running society together. We're already united as a world society in our frustrations and fury. But what if we were united in our organization in our strategy, so that we don't have to live in a society where racist cops who are there to defend private property and white supremacy murder us. We live in a society where the first of the month doesn't fill us with terror and dread because we don't have enough money to pay the rent, and where we don't have a pandemic created by capitalism that could kill our family members because we don't social distance or wear gloves. That we don't have to worry about floods and fires, and we're not terrified of a new invention that could take our job away. I think we need to really be thinking about, why do we even accept capitalism? Why do we accept having to pay rent? Why are we accepting these people? We don't have to live that way, but we do need to organize ourselves to end this society. And so I encourage people to check us out. We're leftvoice.org. We're part of La Izquierda Diario network. We write, our network is 11 different countries, and we publish in 5 different languages, because we really mean it when we say that we need to be international in our strategy, in our thinking, in our activity. We need to be letting people know in other parts of the world what we're doing, find out what they're doing, and exchange notes, and really make planned, coordinated actions against this oppressive and racist and exploitative system.
Yeah. Well, I'm in complete agreement, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. I really am glad I was able to come back.
All right. Talk soon.
Okay.
So.